So it's my pleasure to introduce two strong Center for Community Health partners that will help us help introduce our keynote speakers today. So we have Tico Valle, who is Chief Executive Officer of Chicago Center on Halsted. And we also have Brian Mustansky, who's an Associate Professor in our Department of Medical Social Sciences here at Northwestern, as well as the Director of the Impact LGBT Health and Development Program. Please join me in welcoming them.
So good afternoon. Good. I'm Tico Valle, the CEO of Center on Halsted, and it's an honor to be a part of today's program and to welcome and help introduce our presenters. The Center on Halsted is located in Lakeview. It serves 1,000 people daily. Our mission is to serve the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer community through health and wellness and lifespan programming and advocacy work. Daily, people come through the center either for youth programming or senior programming. In fact, in 2 weeks, we're about to break ground on the first of its kind LGBT senior affordable housing project. And so in creating the center as the most comprehensive in the country, we set out to make sure that we were not only focusing on the needs of our community, but focusing on the strengths of our community and holding our members up high in the work that we do. And our partnership with Impact is one that is robust, is rewarding, and cutting edge. As we look at the center as being the model for the country, this is another step for us to move forward into the future, to be informed with research, and to be cutting edge. And so we're really honored to be working with Brian and his staff.
Thank you, Tico. The Impact program is a program that has a mission to conduct translational research that improves the health of the LGBT community. We seek to serve as a nexus for LGBT health research and training programs at Northwestern, and are happy to meet with anyone, any faculty who are interested in engaging in LGBT health research, connecting to the community, connecting to organizations like the Center on Halsted. We welcome your reaching out to us. Our partnership with the Center on Halsted is really a signature aspect of the Impact program. Being co-located within the center really allows for us to have regular exchange with their staff. It allows us to learn from their important experience. It allows us to run our studies in the community and have engagement of the community in the work that we're doing, and also to move our science, our evidence-based programs into applications in ways that are much more rapid than is traditionally possible. Last year, we co-organized the first Chicago LGBT Health and Wellness Conference, which was really a huge success. Commissioner Bashara was our keynote speaker, and we'll be having our second annual conference this year, which we welcome everyone to attend. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon for this presentation. I had the opportunity to have dinner last night with our keynote speakers, and I know you're really going to enjoy the presentation, which focuses on community-engaged research, the building balance and benefits and bruises. We're excited to hear and learn from the lessons of our presenters about the 10-year translational research, greater than 10-year translational research partnership between the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and Together Transforming Lives, Inc. They have collaborated on many successful health disparities projects addressing a range of diverse conditions, including cancer, cardiovascular disease, HIV/AIDS, and diabetes. They'll share some of what happened along the way, including the hills and valleys and some turns. Our presenters today are Reverend Danny Alice and Professor Giselle Corby-Smith. Dr. Alice is president and CEO of Alice Research and Consulting Services, Incorporated, which serves as the senior consulting agency to 3 large community-based organizations in North Carolina. In addition, he's also the executive director of Together Transforming Lives, Incorporated. TTL began in 2005 with the vision to reduce preventable disease, death and disease in Halifax County's African American population and address racial health disparities. Our other speaker, Dr. Corby-Smith, is professor of social medicine at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and directs the Community Academic Resources for Engaged Scholarship, or CARES, services at the university's Clinical and Translational Institute. She spent the better part of her career trying to understand the health disparities that exist between the haves and the have-nots, and how to engage communities of color appropriately. Their full bios are available on the CCH website. So please join us in welcoming our speakers for today.
Good afternoon. Okay, let me try this again. Good afternoon. Better? Okay, great. I am deeply honored to have been invited to your groundbreaking and official opening for this new center, a new set of collaborations. I'll just give you a sort of a setup for how Dr. Ellis and I are going to do this. I'm going to talk for a little while. He's going to talk for a little while. He'll be better than me, because he does this every Sunday. And then we'll sort of tag team in terms of wrapping up. And we'll try to give enough time for questions so that you all, so that this can be a dialogue. Okay. So you can see by the sort of alliteration that Dr. Ellis came up with this title, the building balance, bruises, and benefits. And so I'm going to start off by just talking. Are you all hearing this echo? Maybe I'm just hearing it. About why CBPR, realizing we have a range of perspectives in the room. I can't assume that folks understand or know anything about CBPR, but might have an interest in learning more about the field. I'll talk a little bit about building the infrastructure that we have developed both through our work in the CTSA as well as one project that we've worked on together, and how we've leveraged that project to further sort of the interests in terms of engaged scholarship. Then we'll talk about the balance, the bruises, and benefits, and it's at the benefits that we'll sort of tag team in terms of our own perspectives on where we see the benefits of this collaboration as well as CBPR. So for those of you that might have, it's a big audience, I don't know who's in the audience right now, but those of you that may have seen me give a talk at some other point, this is a quote from one of the very first studies that I did, focus groups at Grady Memorial Hospital. And this quote is one of those touch points, those touchstones that makes me sort of come back to why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. This African-American gentleman said, if I do all of this, meaning research participation, and it benefits society, given the way brothers are treated in this country, how is it going to help me? So eloquently encapsulating all of the concerns, hopes, and wishes around research, as well as very clearly identifying the doubt and distrust about research participation. Not sure that research participation is going to lead to any improvement in health for individuals or communities. Clear awareness of the disparities in health and access to health care that exists in all of our healthcare settings. And for me, what was also, particularly as a clinician, as a general internist, what was so profound to me is that his experiences in the healthcare system really inform all of his expectations about research participation. And so wherever you are in this nexus of healthcare, research, et cetera, realizing that every interaction is informing someone's expectations of research participation, and you have the opportunity for it to be positive or otherwise. So when I first went to UNC, Nancy King, who's an attorney, and is actually now at Wake Forest University, had written this article that I thought was really quite profound, to really think about this idea of benefit, particularly benefit in research participation. So she describes three potential areas of benefit. The first is the direct benefits of being part of a study and winning the coin toss, getting the right, quote unquote, the right treatment. If it's a randomized controlled trial, you get the one that actually comes out on top at the end of the day. So those direct benefits can accrue to really just about 50% of the people if it's a two-arm study. The other thing she writes about is collateral benefits, those benefits that accrue to everyone because you're in a research study. and because we know that the care that's received, the monitoring, the processes of care are paid attention so exquisitely that people that are part of research actually do better in general. She also then talks about these societal benefits, these squirrely benefits that we all write about in our consent documents. This may not help you, but will hopefully help people like you with either your condition or who come from your community. Those benefits that we all sort of very clearly write in there, we talk about to our IRB. However, nobody ever asked us, well, so who did benefit from this? How did this work actually lead to an improved health for somebody in their community or somebody like your research participants? Nobody ever holds our feet to the fire on this. And so that's when we start talking about those societal benefits, particularly in underserved communities, we have to realize that disparities in health are at least in part determined by social and environmental and other inequities. Social determinants of health is something that, for many of us, we've sort of seen come of age over the last 10 to 15 years. And my suggestion, our suggestion, is that we need to think about how, in the process of research, we can affect these socioeconomic factors. By building capacity amongst community leaders to continue to do the research or to do the research with another academic partner sometime in the future. Create opportunities for employment and training within a research study that is then a marketable skill that can be taken into a variety of other arenas. Build and support the existing infrastructure in communities, either by frequenting the local businesses or local providers, even if it's childcare. Providing the results of the studies back to the individuals in those communities so that they can use them for their own benefits. And during the question and answer period, I'll talk about one of those, one way that we've seen that happen. So why CBPR? Community-based participatory research, or CBPR, has been sort of looked at as a strategy for overcoming past and present injustices committed in the name of research. These experiences, as that quote so clearly noted, really resonate with many communities and result in these really high levels of distrust. The other important point about CBPR is not just about building trust or demonstrating trustworthiness, but the recognition that these are complex problems. As a colleague of mine has quoted someone else, these are wicked problems. These are problems that are thorny, multi-dimensional, multifactorial, and it's, I think, arrogant, sophomoric to think that one hammer is going to be able to break these problems. And so this is recognition that no single individual, agency, or discipline has the expertise, the resources, and the relationships to address the wide range of social, cultural, political, and economic factors that lead to these health inequalities. So as we talk about the building part of CBPR, I'm going to lay out what we've done to try to build the infrastructure to support community-based participatory research as you all are embarking on the next phase of your center. We focused on place, making sure that there's a physical place, a physical space to support engagement. At the University of North Carolina, our state is who we're beholden to. The mission of the university is to serve the residents of our state. And so we need to be thinking about a statewide approach. There's probably as many people in the state as there are in the city of Chicago, so it's about comparable. We also focused on people on the ground, individuals that live and work in the communities and are liaisons to the university, as well as identifying existing expertise to advise and mentor both community members and academic members in doing CBPR. We focused on building capacity, both individual and collective, and then funding research to really catalyze new partnerships and support new investigators who want to do this work, as well as extending existing research to address the myriad of felt needs that exist within North Carolina. So, I am come here representing our CTSA as well. And so ours is called the North Carolina Translational and Clinical Sciences Institute, or NC TRACS. And these are probably you all have the same list of groups that are part of your CTSA. So the group that I'm part of, that I have the good fortune to lead, is called Academic Community Resources for Engaged Scholarship, or CARES. And we have 4 goals or 4 aims for our unit, which is to increase awareness, translation, and utilization of evidence-based interventions, as well as best practices in community-engaged research, to build the capacity and demand for conducting community-based dissemination and implementation research, as well as to push the science around translational research by supporting innovative analytic frameworks. Looks like somebody's coming in. Methods and metrics, because this field really needs more science behind the work that we're doing. And then finally, looking at ways to catalyze the development of a translational research workforce or research careers. And I'll talk a little bit about how we've done that with the historically black colleges and universities in our state. So the CARES unit is broken out into 3 units, and there's a research services where our statewide infrastructure exists, the training and outreach core, and then the methods unit. And so this is a map of our state, and you'll see here we have 5 areas where we have actually community outreach specialists that are out in the state, that live in the communities that they're working in. We also have, this is where UNC Chapel Hill is. We also have a network of churches, and while I'm not going to speak directly about our Carolina Church network, this is something that Danny and I have also been working on. And then we have some areas where we actually have some density in terms of cancer programming. In 2 of the 5 regions, we have community advisory boards, and we have regional community advisory boards, people that live, work, and play in the regions that they're going to be advising investigators. So across the 2 boards, across the 2 regions, we have 26 members, and they come from about 30 counties in those catchment areas. And their functions really are to support, provide an external support system for researchers as they're developing their studies and rolling them out, provide guidance on the development, implementation, and dissemination of the research and the research findings, and direct investigators to other community resources, and provide feedback to investigators on development of materials and the products that they'll be using in their research. We also, through our CTSA have directed funding to support engaged scholarship. Again, not necessarily CBPR. In my view, it doesn't have to be all the way on the edge of end of the spectrum, but as long as you're engaging with stakeholders, I'm there to support appropriate and authentic engagement. It's really to build the capacity of the partnership, the 2 funding streams that we've used, to engage in partner research as well as to catalyze future research collaborations. So one of the programs the first program actually that we rolled out was the CAP grants, or Community Academic Partnership grants. These grants went to researchers that had an existing partnership or were developing a partnership with community groups. We funded 4 across the 2 regions. The second initiative that we are just wrapping up now are the Research Engaged Community Scholars, or the REC Scholars. And these grants actually went to community members who were partnered with academics to buy out part of their time to be able to develop that partnership. And we use the same metrics that every other CTSA looks at, which is papers written and grants submitted. But these partnerships, these 10 partnerships, have been incredibly productive in terms of submitting grants and just having that time to come together to really think through problems, and as well as an acknowledgement of the importance of the research, I think has been very important for all that have been involved. Building the capacity to do to do engaged scholarship, just as we, those of us that are researchers, we have academic mentors to help us guide us through this. We wanted to make sure that we had a core group of people that could support anyone that's doing engaged scholarship along the spectrum. So one group a subset of that group was actually here last month. Dr. Ellis was part of that consultation. This group is called the Community Experts in CBPR. These are 16 community members who have extensive experience as research partners in funded research in their communities using a CBPR methodology. And these experts are there to mentor both community collaborators as well as academic collaborators in the research that they're hoping to do, particularly as it relates to CBPR. These individuals have many, many collective years of CBPR experience, as well as some definite perspectives, not only of how the research should be done, the project should be done, but also how the institution needs to change to be responsive to that work, and have been a tremendous source of support in terms of institutional change for our CTSA. That project, or this pulling together of these experts, was funded by a supplement to our CTSA that was a partnership between the CTSA and the Prevention Research Centers that are funded by the CDC. As part of that supplement, we had a community research fellow who's somebody that's in residence, somebody that is actually hired at the university to be a sort of a boundary spanner, to be able to create a physical human resource bridge between the academy and the university and the community, who had the ability to transfer skills to both community and academic faculty in this effort. We also have core faculty with expertise in engaged scholarship in a whole range, from CBPR to practice-based research. We're building North Carolina has one of the fastest growing Latino populations in the country, and so we wanted to make sure to be able to address the needs and interests of those of that community. So we have a specific focus on Latino health, and obviously a broader focus on health disparities. And then the other part of this capacity, of the depth of the expertise that we are able to have at UNC, is that we have advisors, specifically 2 advisors to our unit, that are liaisons to the broader community advisory board for our broader CTSA. We have 2 individuals who represent our interest on the larger CTSA. And these are funded positions. In fact, all of these are funded positions. I'll give you one example of the consultation, which was part of what the group that was here a month or 2 ago actually did, is this charrette process or charrette consultation, which is really an opportunity to strengthen partnerships at any stage of development, from newbies to folks that have been in the trenches together for a long time but are looking at a way to strengthen or make a transition. These often are about 3 hours, a 3-hour facilitated session. Review the community academic partnership strengths and questions, challenges. They get a detailed charrette summary, and then a follow-up discussions, 1 or 2 over the course of several months, to really talk about the recommendations and to think about the next steps. Other capacity that we've layered onto this physical infrastructure and human infrastructure is building community capacity to do research. We, for the first probably 3 or 4 years of our CTSA, we did 12. It started out as 7 and then evolved because there was interest in having more sessions, a 12-part series on a broad range of research topics across 3 regions of the state. So a 36-session workshop series across the state of North Carolina to really build capacity, familiarize folks with the terms in research, as well as to create an awareness about translational research. And the last function is really to get out the message about our CTSA. We've now since moved to a more tailored and focused approach to really, when groups come to us, for example, we had a group of faith-based organizations come to us and say they really wanted to focus on grant writing. for their network. And so having a more tailored approach to what folks is what we're moving towards now. The other element of building capacity is working with our historically black colleges and universities. We have, our state benefits from having, I think, one of the highest number of minority-serving institutions. We have 11 across our state. And many of those institutions have very deep expertise in basic science research, but very little, if they have that strength in basic science, very little along the rest of the translational spectrum. Or they have tremendous depth in terms of engaged programming, community-engaged programming, but not necessarily a lot in terms of community-engaged research. And so meeting wherever folks are, but really supporting them in moving along that spectrum. So either moving from basic science maybe to clinical research, or moving from engaged programming to developing a more rigorous evaluation process, as well as maybe doing more research in the context of their community-based programming. These are, so we have partnerships now with 2 of those HBCUs, and it's a comprehensive sort of set of mentorship, but building capacity at the institution rather than asking people to leave their institution and come to UNC. I want to talk a little bit now about Project Grace. Project Grace is a community-based participatory research project that Dr. Ellis and I have been able to be a part of for the last about 8 years. This project started in 2004, so I guess that's 9 years. With a grant that went to the National Institute for Minority Health and Health Disparities, or then it was the National Center for Minority Health and Health Disparities. We had funding from the NIH as well as from some local foundations. This is a partnership between University of North Carolina, community-based organizations and individuals in Nash and Edgecombe counties that share a sister city, Rocky Mount. And with the goal to really eliminate health disparities. And we chose to start with HIV and sexually transmitted infections. This project focuses on individual behavior, social environment, as well as the physical environment. It was clear from prior work in this area, as well as some of our own formative research, that the individual behavior change that had been, at least up until that point, sort of had been the way people had addressed HIV prevention wasn't working in rural communities or African American communities that are now the epicenter for HIV in our country. We used a staged approach to partnership development where throughout our early stages really focused on making sure community members could give feedback on the products of the research and findings through community forums. All of the activities sort of happened in parallel, and we really paid a specific attention to these early developmental stages of who is at the table, how do we work together. And what I want to share with you all is a little bit about how we work together, and then talk just for a few minutes about the outcomes of the research, and then how we've leveraged this infrastructure because we've paid so much attention to those early stages, how we've leveraged it for other investigators. So Project Grace is, we think of it as a consortium and sort of represent the greater community by this circle. And the last time we counted, we had 51 organizations and 43 individuals from these counties that said they wanted to be part of this consortium. The RFA that we responded to asked for a community advisory board. And early on, we decided that a community advisory board was actually not in the spirit of CBPR, at least for the needs of our partnership. That there shouldn't be a board that advises me and then I make the final decision. That in fact this is a shared decision making and we should all have one vote and be able to express our opinion about whatever the issue was at hand, and that one vote would be the one vote. And so we chose a steering committee for to guide this partnership with careful attention to because this is 2 counties that have been the focus of our research, with careful attention to make sure that there was equal representation, not only across the 2 counties, but also in terms of making sure that community members always had the majority voice. So in our bylaws, there can be no more than, I think 30% of the steering committee members can be university employees. We also wanted to make sure that our subcontractors were also part of the steering committee as well. So with 26 members, I was talking with someone earlier today, and they mentioned, 26 people, how do you make decisions? How do you get any work done? We actually have subcommittees, 6 subcommittees, where the real work of the steering committee gets done, and we have a membership and bylaws, events planning, research design, communications and publications, nominations, and the fiscal and budget committee. Every subcommittee is chaired by a community member. And the Fiscal and Budget Committee is co-chaired by a UNC member. Anyone from the consortium can sit on the subcommittee, on any of these subcommittees. This is our mission, to improve the health of minority and high-risk populations by establishing collaborative structures and processes that respond to empower and facilitate communities in defining and solving their own problems. We chose to stay away from a focus on geography or a focus on condition because there's so much need, we wanted to make sure that we left ourselves open to be able to address that need wherever we saw that it needed to be addressed. So our capacity building model is a 5-part model that our process consultant, Visions Incorporated, has helped us put together. And when I talk about that sort of attention to early partnership development, this is the attention. This was actually one of my collaborators, BJ Council, when we were writing this grant, said we need to have Visions included in this grant. And I didn't know who Visions was. Several people of my partners knew who they were, had done their training, but I had no idea. And so, Visions was put into the grant, and thank goodness they were. Because this focus on process, the focus on making sure that we have the tools and the means to communicate around these difficult topics was critical, I think, essentially, as it was essential for our success. And so I'm just going to walk you through a little bit about the 5 parts of this model. We all start with ISMS training. So this is training on all of the ways that people can be oppressed and have been oppressed in this country, in our communities, and how those dynamics actually can come into our partnership and impact the way that we interact with each other. This is a 4-day training. Anyone that's part of the steering committee, anyone that is a hired member, whether it's a community member or an academic member, has to go through this 4-day training. And we offer it periodically, at least once a year, several times a year, for new people that are coming into the partnership. And anyone from the consortium can go to the Visions training. And it's actually quite a benefit because it's not cheap. It's a coveted kind of training so it's actually one of those benefits that we give back to our community as well. Visions also provides process consultation. They are an ex officio member of our steering committee. They're of one person, either the lead, the founder for Visions, or one of her collaborators or one of her colleagues is always at our steering committee meetings to help us with when things, because invariably, if you're in this long enough and intensely enough, there will be conflict. It's not whether there is conflict, it's how do you get through the conflict? And are you still at the table or still willing to sit at the table to move through the conflict? And so having them at each meeting to identify behaviors or dialogue that can be problematic, I think has been very helpful to facilitate our work. Based on wherever that conflict is, we might have a capacity building session. So we're at the last year of our intervention grant in transition now. And so we had an intensive transition meeting where we have subcontractors that have been working on this grant, some of them from the very beginning for 8 years. and others, certainly for 5 years, who are no longer actually going to be in the next phase of this project. How do we manage those transitions, both logistically as well as in the way we relate to each other? And finally, we have an annual process evaluation where we sort of look at how one of the things, if you all remember, several years ago, there was an AHRQ systematic review on community-based participatory research. And one of the things that was in that systematic review was how do we measure the fidelity to CBPR, to this participatory nature of the process of research. And so that's part of what our process evaluation annually looks at. How are we being true to this methodology? And if so, how is that working? And if not, what do we need to how do we make a change? And then we have an annual retreat that's several months after that, where we can focus on some of these problems, work on addressing policies, to address what we see as organizational issues, as well as deal with some of the sort of strategic planning for the coming year. The multicultural isms training, as I mentioned, is really to ensure and support inclusiveness of the relationship and the processes in the research project, to understand the impact of racism, sexism, classism, heterosexism, and all the other isms, all the other ways that people are oppressed, and how to overcome those isms. And then finally, to build a successful coalition amongst all of the partners. I mentioned the process consultation, one vision consultant at least at every steering committee meeting, and then 2 consultants organize and facilitate each of the annual retreats. The tailored capacity building sessions were specific training and coaching, emphasizing coalition building and collaborative problem solving. And then the annual process evaluation that really focuses on these 6 areas. Sort of what is the purpose and the current focus? Is everybody aware of this, or are there some people that know and some don't? The effectiveness of our interpersonal relationships, the accomplishment of agreed upon work, the needs of the relationship and the work plan, and then awareness of and experiences with isms and cultural differences and their impact on the work. And finally, the perceptions of value, inclusion, empowerment, and personal capacity to contribute to the process. The annual retreat. And then I wanted to just talk a little bit about how we've focused on capacity building amongst our participants in the project. So as I mentioned, we have our intervention is on HIV prevention. And Teach One, Reach One is the name of the intervention. It's a lay health advisor intervention that invests in youth aged 10 to 14 years old. We also did a pilot of Photo Voice to really talk about the disparities in our community, as well as piloting the methodology of doing it with youth and their caregivers. Oftentimes it's just with one small group, not with youth and adults. That pilot ended up being put into our advocacy curriculum, which is called Making Healthy Change Happen, and I'll come back to that as well. And the last thing that we've done to build collective capacity to address this is our spoken word showcase that we've just had earlier this year, which is using performance poetry to really raise awareness about HIV in our communities, as well as to address sort of the rampant stigma, HIV-related stigma that still exists within the South. So TORO, or Teach One, Reach One, is a 12-session HIV STI prevention intervention with youth that are ages 10 to 14 years old and their caregivers. Now, you all may remember that I mentioned that I'm a general internist. I am not a pediatrician, and I'm not an infectious disease specialist. So this is, for those of you that are researchers, this is what happens when you go to folks and say, what is your need? Because if it were me, I wouldn't be doing this. If I could have chosen the topic, I would have chosen cardiovascular risk reduction in grown people, not in children. But this is where the need was. And so the resource that I brought was that I knew infectious disease specialists, I knew people who dealt with adolescent sexuality, and I could bring them to the table to help us work through these issues. We've trained almost 200 youth and adults as lay health advisors to reach out to just over 300 of their peers, and so the unit of intervention here is the lay health advisor, whereas our outcomes we're measuring in the peers and their peer groups. The intervention objectives are really to delay sexual activity among the youth, increase the parent or adult-teen communication, increase condom use among sexually active youth, increase healthy dating behaviors among the youth, and then finally increase parental monitoring amongst the caregivers. So this, as I said, we had 3 years of intervention development, 5 years of intervention implementation, and even that would have been, I think, a tremendous accomplishment. However, as I said, there is a tremendous need within the communities that we're working in. And so we've chosen to leverage that existing infrastructure and all the time and energy that we've put into it to make sure other needs are being addressed. So finally, I get to come back to cardiovascular disease risk reduction, Empower to Prevent, which is a community-based intervention that's based on the diabetes prevention program intervention. We had the opportunity to bring in new partners with funding from a local foundation, as well as ARA funding, a new junior investigator, as well as I said, new funding that came into our communities. We've worked with the Kellogg community scholars in their postdoc programs and have been able to address intimate partner violence within our youth groups, as well as the advocacy intervention that I mentioned that was developed, Making Healthy Change Happen, was developed by a Kellogg scholar. And we're now working on disseminating cardiovascular disease interventions, evidence-based interventions, and across the 2 counties as well as other counties that we're working in. And now I'm going to transition to Reverend Ellis. Turn mine off.
How's everybody doing? Let me ask the question again. How's everybody doing? Yeah. I see this as people. I want to tell you what an offering right now. Let's put it around. Giselle has done an excellent job telling you some of the things we've been involved in the last 10 years. What I want to talk to you about now is how do we do what it is that we need to be doing, what that thing might look like. And so I kind of came up with, to minimize the rules and to maximize the benefits, you must first change your perception. Change the way you look at your target audience. Change the way you look at the community. You're going to have to change that. Because you didn't grow up there. And if you have, you've changed. So you need to change your perception. But then out of that, you're going to have to change your perspective. Where do you see yourself? Are you part of the community? Even though you work at an institution? How many community folks have here? Raise your hand. You're from the community. And then finally, we got to change our perception. Change the way we've been doing business. It's not a us or them, right? Or those. And all those things that we've heard over the years. But it's really a we. Especially in this tight economy, tight situation that we're looking at. Now, these are some of the challenges that I've seen. It's part of the study that I did. My dissertation had to do with health promotions and pastors and sociological responsibility and servant leadership and all those things. But this was a study done by Dr. Shirley Timmons down in Clemson University, and she did it with the Baptist Association. So see, these are some of the concerns that came out of the faith institute. And I want to admonish you today that if you're going to do community research, don't forget about the faith community. Remember that this country was founded on the idea of having freedom within your faith. So don't leave them out. And I'm going to be more in depth about that in a few minutes. But you got to meet the congregation needs. You got the ethics you got to look at, because you don't run nothing. You come into my wall, I'm there. I ain't going to say it. But remember that when you come. So being humble gets you a long way. And then understand that there's some common understanding, that there's some core for the faith entity. But really what I want to talk to you about is changing your perception. You change your perception in order to understand the people that we're trying to target. The people like me, the people from the community. Let me give you some disclaimers. My education is not in theology, I'm prolific in theology. I'm an undergraduate is I'm a nurse from the very beginning, hospital administrator, I'm a graduate, and an MBA in healthcare management, so I don't have a master's in public health, and my PhD is in human services and research. And God called me to pastor a group of people. All right? So change a person's behavior. You must change a person's situation. So you cannot come into the community with one dimension. I'm just going to deal with health alone. Because health may not be my priority at that time. So you got to look at my situation. And then what seems like laziness is often just exhaustion. Sometimes people are just tired. They're not lazy, but you think about all the things that they go through throughout the day, and then you want them to come to a focus group at 7 o'clock at night. Don't you get tired? Fighting the traffic that you fight? So just because people don't participate does not necessarily mean that they're lazy and they're uninterested, but sometimes you just get tired. And then also your perception is what seems like resistance is often just a lack of clarity. If I'm not sure and I don't understand the language that you're using, then I can't say yes to something I don't understand. Fear is very paralyzing. So it's very important that when you go into the community that you're very clear about what it is you intend to do. How you're going to disseminate what it is that you're going to find. Right? And be able to do that. Now, changing your perspective. Researchers should remember. Somebody say remember. See, I know y'all don't act like you're at church, so go ahead and be obedient. Say remember. Researchers should remember that research is not foreign in our community. Let me just talk from the African American community, the black community, it is foreign to us. It's not nuanced. It's just faulty. It's been done for many years. It's just been done incorrectly. So don't think that you're going into something, presenting something that's totally new. Right? Then remember to reflect on the baggage that you're carrying. Every researcher, every individual in this room has baggage based on your limited experiences. So if you had a bad experience in the community, then you have baggage. If you had a good experience, it's baggage. Spend all your time within the walls of academia, then you have baggage. And you need to remember that you're carrying baggage. And baggage sometimes is based on, again, even our ethnicity. All those things are baggage. You need to remember that when you go into the community. And remember the reality for the community is different than your current need. You come looking for data. But I'm trying to figure out how I can get a ride to the doctor's office. I'm trying to figure out how am I going to take care of that copay. So I know you need for me to take this 100-question survey. I understand that the questions repeat themselves every 5th question. But my need might be that I need a little gas to be able to get to work next week. And if that ain't a concern of yours, then your methodology is not a concern of mine. And I always say this, and I don't mean this in a very harmful way, but I go to heaven with diabetes. I go to heaven with heart disease. I go to heaven with all those diseases. And if you cure me of those, I'm still going to have to go to heaven. So I have some current and some real-time needs that I'm hoping that as a concerned researcher, you're going to look at those. And then remember that you are to capture and tell the story. You are not the story. Do me a favor real quick. Just point to yourself and say, it's not all about me. I know you got to call this faith. I know you want to get on the tenure track. I understand all of that. You need to I understand all that. But when you come to the community, it needs to be about who? About the community. I know that's hard, because for years as researchers we have not been taught that. But in today's time, we need to really think about that. And you're going to be effective. Now, to change your perspective, researchers should know why the faith place and the church is a great place for health engagement. It is a great place for health engagement. First of all, its profile. The church's profile. The faith community's profile. When you look at it, it's a great place for health engagement. Because I can hit you with some stuff that says love above all things. That I wish that you would prosper and be in good health as your soul prosper. So I can tell you all those things. So you need to understand it very clearly that there's a profile that exists in the faith community that ties very closely to what you're doing at any of these universities. So we're not as far apart as you may think. It's just that it's been presented that way. So the church has a very good profile, and it has great pillars. It has great pillars, and I'm going to talk about what those pillars are. But those pillars have existed for years, and they're there waiting on you. One of the things that Dr. Corbett Smith talked about, she talked about cardiovascular, she talked about HIV, I think she talked about cancer, but we've done a project as well to deal with mental health. I've done mental health in the black church. Can you believe that? There's some crazy folks. See, they go to church every Sunday. You lay hands on them, but they need to lay on somebody's couch. Can somebody say amen? Amen. Okay, here we go. Let's look at the profile. The church has a history. A history of what? It has a history of being there for the community. When nobody else has been there. When the university wouldn't be there. When there are things that go wrong in the community, it's the church that protests. It's the church that shows up. And a lot of times, unlike Dr. Corbett Smith, many of our researchers and doctors don't put on that white coat and go to jail. So the church has a history. And don't ignore that history. Don't just dismiss that. It has a health nature. It has a food closet, it has a clothing closet, it's doing health screening. And I understand that it doesn't do the fidelity, the level that many of us as researchers look for, but it has a healthy nature. People come to the church because it is a hospital, right? It's a spiritual hospital. And people that are there are wounded, right? They're wounded, and so they have to be protected. And that's where the word shepherd comes from. And that's why you have to deal with the shepherd before you're able to get into his sheep or her sheep. And then understand that I believe that the church has a holy mandate. I believe that it has a spiritual mandate to help people with health. Because here's the bottom line, and this has been practical. If people buy medicine, they can't do their tithe and all that. If they're paying a lot of doctor bills, they can put a whole lot in plate. So I want my people well. I want them to concentrate on things. I want them working. I don't want them unemployed. I don't want them missing sick days and all those kind of things. So there's a holy mandate to be able to help people. If you can't help the least of these, when it's all said and done, what is your life really about? Is it about the car you drive? Is it about the house you live in? Is it about the trips you take? No. It's really about the difference that you make in the lives of those that are on your assignment. So also I believe that you must again change your perspective and these pillars. Compassion. And I understand that when you live on the west side like I do, and yes, I live on the west side, but here's something you need to understand. It's all right to empathize. You know, I empathize with your problem. It's all right to sympathize. But the real power is in compassion. And compassion is the ability to be able to change places with the person. That's what makes the difference. Are you willing to change places with the person? If you're not, then you'll be limited by how much you can help the person. Understand that it's a history of helping with hardships. I do it every week. Folk can't get a light bill. Can't get gas. All those things I help them with. Now watch this. Here's the real power. I mentioned this to Jen last night when we were talking. It makes a difference when you can help me help those people. Because if you can help me help those people, then I can have those people help you. And you do need help. You do need help. Understand the Holy Spirit speaks for itself. And in the church, there are real people. They're real people. They're not mythical people. They're not people that you find after you go down to the office of statistics and they died from disease 5 years ago and you want to know the present. No, these are real people that are sitting there hurting and pain. The church offers those in need. But then you have the community competent. They know what's happening. They know where the need is. They know how to get into the housing area. I'm doing a project right now into the housing area. Because I believe that if you really want to see a major change, then go into the housing project, the housing area, and you can really get some immediate return on your investment. And I'm going to talk about that momentarily. So don't forget about the people that are struggling. I don't really know where they are in Chicago. I don't know if it's in the Wild West. I don't know if it's in South Chicago. But I know it sure ain't no man. This is mine. I know that. But they hit me hard last night. I know they over there. So if you do your research over there off Michigan Avenue, you're wasting your time. And then there's a hunger for change. In my dissertation, I write that really pastors want to be involved in research, they just don't know how. They just don't know how. And we don't like things that we don't understand. Because we don't like standing in front of people saying, I don't know. Which we ought to do more often. But it's an image thing. So the more you can equip me and help me, then the more apt I am to help my people change. There's a hunger for change. Now, change your prescription. This big word here, disintermediation, it just simply means cut out the nonsense. As a researcher, you need to cut out the nonsense. Cut out or cut back those things that separate you from your data source. And I understand that there's a bureaucracy that goes along with the university, but you got to fight that battle. You got to fight that battle. And I'm going to talk about later about equity, but you got to be willing to talk about, well, we can't do that. We can't spend money there. I understand that there's some restrictions, but then there's some leeway. And you got to fight where you can fight. Because on the outside, in the community, they don't know the fight. All they know is when you come to them. But if you really want them to trust you, when you go back to your division director, your department director, you got to be willing to fight and say, well, we got to find a way to do this. We got to find a way to use vendors in that community. We got to find a way to eat meals in that community. We got to find a way to go to them and not have them come to us all the time. Because most of the time, you can have vehicles you can drive when they have transportation issues. And then you got to go down this whole racism idea. That's what ism training is about and all those kind of things. And it exists. And we're not asking you to be blind to that. Because if I'm not mistaken, most people in South Chicago don't look like you. Some of you, they look mostly like this. Don't look at me and cut your eyes at me. I teach people that live crazy in the air sun. And it don't even bother me. The truth of the matter is, you're in Chicago. And you need to take care of everybody that lives in where? Chicago. Don't just stop the line at 57th Street, wherever it is on the list. And look, a worthy journey has 4 ingredients. And this, if you're going to approach the community, learn these 4 ingredients. First of all, there must be some curiosity. If you want me to be involved in it, I want to know, the question, what's going to happen if I do this? I want to be curious about it. Raise my curiosity about it. But then also understand exploration. What is it? Are we going to be able to find the problem? Are we going to get down to the problem? And then this question of discovery. What's going to be new about it? What's new? Where's the newness? If we do this research project, where is the newness? Because we've had research. I told you before, it's just false. What's going to come out of it? And then finally, transformational. In other words, am I going to grow from it? Am I going to get anything out of it as a community person? I know what you're going to get. You're going to publish a paper and forget to put my name on it. I understand that. Forget the name of the church, black and out, the community. You don't want to tell people where it was from. I understand all that. But really, am I going to grow from it? Are my folk going to be even better because you were there? That is important. And then finally, I'm going to have two other slides and we're out of here. You can ask the question, whatever. And I'm big about this. And I only know because I've been in Northwestern the 2 times I've been here, so I don't know anything about UIC and all the other places that may be here. But let me explain something to you. There needs to be some equity. You get a grant, I'm looking at the budget. Let me just roll. I told you I don't have an MPH. I got an MPA. So I won't be there when we put the budget together. And it needs to be fair. If you have a 40%, 41% indirect cost, and you get a research associate, I want a research associate. I want somebody that's going to handle it because guess what? I'm the CEO of my operation. And I have a lot of people. In my site alone, I have 32 people who are on the payroll. And I have to do payroll every month. And all time sheets and all those things. So when we start talking about equity, and you were talking about you get a letter of support from me, no, I remember an agreement. I want to know that when that money comes back, that they ain't gonna just get up there and stop at the quotas, but that money gonna come where? Past Office of Sponsored Research, and a check gonna come to me. Now, for those of you community folks, I hope you get to the point where I am now, is that now I am the lead agent in applying for the grant. And so I pay the university. They send me an invoice, and I write them a check. I can write a check quicker than they can. My bureaucracy is not long as theirs. Right? All I got to do is keep the deeds in the bag. No, I'm just kidding. So financial equity is a serious matter. Don't come and prostitute the community. Don't do that. Don't do that. Fight for financial equity. Then on that, administrative understanding, you need this. Yes, the church operates a little differently, but we do operate proficiently. We do a lot of things with little. And then implementation, flexibility, and fidelity. We can do that. We can do that. Right? We do best practices, curriculums. We teach it the way it should be taught. And we can train people within our churches, within our community that can teach. We got retired teachers. I got 5 retired principals in my congregation. And I'm in a rural community. And I've been there for 8 years. And when you come there, I got a building in there. I got a $1 million complex in a rural community in a city that only has 2,500 people. So don't tell me what you can't do financially. I went to a church with 35 folk, and I've had over 800 to join. And almost 700 of them have been baptized. It can happen. But you got to be willing to work with me to make a difference in the community. And then report imperative. So when you tell the story, don't tell it like you did it by yourself. Tell what the community did to help you. And get away from the paternalistic ideology that you have all the answers, because you don't. Now, to understand this, the must for the researchers, 2 components necessary for the researcher to elicit the help and the involvement of the pastor is, here it is, the disease must have a theological contextualization. If you really want the church to talk about it, then find where it is in theology. And you raise the interest of the pastor. Let me get it now. You want to come and talk about HIV? Then talk about the woman at the well. How she was an outcast. And nobody wanted to deal with it. If you want to talk about, make sure I got my term right, Brian, you want to talk about LGBT, the gay community, the Bible's not oblivious to that. Talk about the woman at the well. And how she was set aside. How society looked at her differently. Until someone came along and saw her as being inclusive. That's important. You said, well, no, that ain't my job. If it ain't important to you, if theology ain't important to you, then guess what? Your research ain't important to you. Right. So you got to respect my profession like I would what? Respect yours. So work with the pastor to find a theological platform to present that to the people and then you're ready for it. And then you must locate clergy who will accept the challenge to bring heaven to earth. Okay, you get that later on. They got to be willing to say, you know what, we got problems now that we can find answers to. And if I work with Dr. Corey Smith, if I work with Dr. Sinead, if I work with Dr. Adam Moore, I work with this university, I can help my people now. And here's the trick. Here's the trick. Trick is a bad word, but let me give you a lie. Watch this. You know why people run to join my church? Because I have partnerships with universities. I'm bringing things to them that they've never seen before. They get services they've never heard about. You know, I got people leaving the city, coming there, just because the services are there, the research is there. They're learning about their own disease processes. They're getting diabetes machines and diabetic machines, and they're getting blood pressure checked on a regular basis. You know, they don't have any health insurance, but they get to see doctors. And doctors, watch this now, they look like them, and when they don't look like them, they know how to think like them. And that's important to them. And it's the final thing here for me, and then we'll close it out. If you're going to do this, be deliberate. Don't lie to me. Don't tell me you won't come and you don't come. Don't make an excuse about IRB. I know about it. I understand. But if you don't want to give them your Saturday morning, tell me you don't want to give them your Saturday morning. And come to my health fair. And come to my community event. You know, don't say, well, you know, they're not allowing us to travel, you know, as a travel restriction. Be deliberate. And be different. Be different. Be a different kind of researcher. Be human. Don't be robotic. I never intended to go back and get my PhD. get it. Because when I had an MBA in the research community, people didn't respect it, so I tried to show them that, hey, I can be a researcher too, so I went back to school. I just refused to allow the university to own me. That's the only difference. I'll do some adjunct stuff. But ain't nobody older than me but me. So I just tell you, I get on a plane. Matter of fact, in a few hours, but I'm get on a plane and roll out. And you can't call my dean. Because I am the dean. I paid for that PhD. You got to be, darling, Darren, you got to be willing to take some chances. You got to go to South Chicago. I understand. But you got to really go out there because that's what it is. And you got to be diligent. You got to be engaging. Giselle, let's talk about the benefits a little bit. Institutional change, shift, right? It's a reality. It's got to happen. Can't continue to do business as we've always done. You got to make a shift. And I know change is hard, but it's constant. And if you don't, you're not going to be relevant. Organizational sustainability, we're going to talk about it in a little bit. Community improvement and access to primary data. Now, changing the promotion and tenure guidelines, obviously that's something for the professor to talk about. You got to fight that fight, whatever it means. I know that there is a place in the university that you get to, Giselle, where you don't have to answer to quite as many people. But when you get there, and I don't know who in the room is there, but don't forget when you went there. Remember when you were a junior investigator? I know you don't remember that. But when you get to the point that you're making decisions, whatever it requires to be on the tenure track, I don't know what all that entails. Please make sure that you're mentoring somebody else and getting them there. Giselle?
So this is just to say that because of the depth of this partnership and other partnerships and the CTSA, that we've been able to actually change, and so that Engaged Scholarship is actually recognized. All of our promotion and tenure guidelines have had to be revised across all the schools to reflect this kind of change. And then the recognition of the need for a new paradigm of dealing with grants, where either we are the sub, as Dr. Ellis has mentioned, where we were the sub to the grant, the first CBD grant that we did. He was the lead agency for it. And also when we have multiple subcontracts, because we're trying to have as multiple agencies in the community to do the work, that we need a process, a new paradigm. And this has been a far slower set of progress around this issue. But there is, there's a glimmer of hope. And then, so Dan, you can talk about this.
This is what came out of, one of the things that came out of our partnership. Carolina Church Network is a 501c3. I just happen to be the president of it. The university worked very closely with us, and we had 20 churches come together across the state and form our own entity. So now, when we ready to go talk business to the university, we're talking with the support of 20 churches, 20 congregations, at least 20 communities. So when we go ahead and talk to the provost, we're talking business, and we're talking statewide. And so now the president of that particular organization, we meet Saturday at Washington. We meet in my location, right there, and Dr. Paul Galloway is flying back in and driving an hour and a half just to be there to be on site with us, along with Jenny and several others. So they're coming to our location to learn more about it. And then Grace has been incorporated as well. We've done the paperwork for that. It's been formalized. And we don't have time to talk about that today, but if you're going to have a partnership within the community, please put structure in place. That's very important. Have a way to make sure that Giselle talks about it a lot, where decisions are made not from top down, but make sure it's horizontal when decisions are made. Charette, we talked about that, part of the CTSA process. I am one of those community experts that they talk about. What she didn't mention about community experts is that we get paid for what we do. So we're not just bringing people in and putting them in advisory capacity, but they're on the clock. They get paid $50 an hour. Every time they consult with an organization, they're getting paid. And these are people from the community. They get paid to help build these capacities. Behavior modification in the community, it doesn't matter. Research is causing change. It's happening. There's a shift in seeking access to care. There's job creation. When UNC comes to do business with us, we put people to work. I'm working on a project right now, and I tell the health educator, it's got to be hired from that community. I am not allowing you to bring somebody you're going to pick out of a can somewhere and bring them and have no cultural purity and cultural sensitivity. If you got a $30,000, $35,000 paying position, I want some input about who that person is going to be that you're going to hire. And if you hire that person, I'll make sure they're successful in our community. Right? But outsiders come on this transformational grants that they got out there now, where our way and they're coming in the community is not working. Individual, organization, community, health, knowledge increase. We've shown already, our results show that people know better, and people got to know better in order to do better. They got to know better to do better, and there's less resistance to future research. And finally, willing participants in church congregation. My folks are ready for research. Anytime I say the word research, they like when they come. They're ready for it. They take surveys or whatever. Matter of fact, I'm doing a survey Saturday, and they get $5 if they do it. Just take the survey and do the second part of it. They get $15 more. They get $20. $20 isn't a lot of money to you, but it's gas money for some people next week. That's the bottom line. And all the pastors that are involved, I'm giving them a gift certificate for $300 per quarter, just for their participation, for their time, the use of the copier, their internet, and all those things. Credibility on both sides of the fence. The university needs credibility in the community, and we need credibility within the institution. Larger sample size, the increased turnaround is needed. We need to get some letters out. We can do some sample surveys for you. Remember, as an agreement, you ain't got to wait 4 months to get it from us. But if Giselle calls me, I have a letter for her within 24 hours. I can turn it around. I can get anybody to sign a letter. I'm supporting what it is we need to do, and then we make my mind to be able to do it. And so, a good long relationship, exciting. In conclusion, CTSA, it speaks for itself. I like the last one here. Community organizations can attract needed attention to issues from experts. I get to bring doctors to a rural community with a ratio of 1 to 10,000. I mean, I'm the hottest thing out there. I throw their name around, I do a name dropping quick, and say, look, hey, I know this oncologist, Paul Godley, I'll call him up and ask a question. Like this internist that I know, I'll call up and ask her, and she can refer me to somebody or whatever the case may be, and people love it. They love it. So you bring a lot to the community, and the community brings a lot to you. And that's it. We're subject to your question.
Yes?
I work at Rutherford Hospital, and we are involved in some studies that require organ donation, and our researchers have difficulty with the idea of paying participants to be in studies like that, and just wanted your input.
So the question is you said research has problems with it.
Correct.
Look at my face. You gave everything else you want, right? Now you're not paying for the organ, but you got to value my time. That's what I mean. You pay for what you value, and valuable things never going to sell. So really, if you value my time, you ought to consider it. I'm very open. Giselle knows nobody gets my time without paying. They just don't. You said, what about volunteering? Well, I do it when I want to do it. But you don't get to decide that. You don't get to decide that.
I think that sums it up.
So a lot of our current approach to research and this very sharp line we have between clinical care and research is a reaction to the way the minority communities were treated in research in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And yet, what I'm hearing from you is bringing those two back together. Am I hearing this right?
I think you're hearing it right. And what I have decided is that it's my role to invest people with information and knowledge so that they can make an informed choice. I think the difference is that those past abuses, people were not making informed choices. They were not given the opportunity to make a choice. So if you look at the U.S. Public Health Service study at Tuskegee, those men were never given a choice about whether they were in a study or not in a study. We can talk about why or how, that particular era in medicine, nobody was given a choice to do, people were doing stuff on patients regardless of what they felt. It was a more paternalistic approach. My feeling is that when we both are sitting at the table and we're having an open dialogue that respects the other person, that's a whole different kind of decision making than if I show up and I push a piece of paper under Danny's pen and ask him to sign it without giving him the opportunity to ask questions, to think about whether it's in keeping with his views and values. I think it's just this paradigm that we're talking about is just a microcosm of a much larger movement in medicine of shared decision making.
And that's important. That's important. Let me tell you the reason why I didn't bring it up. Because it's been separated has not worked. The reality is now our pharmaceutical industry are producing medication that only works with limited information. We do not get minorities in clinical trials. Then as we move further into this thing, we're going to be left further behind. And we're going to find that this disparity that exists about how long we live compared to the majority is going to only get wider. So the truth of the matter is we need to be at the table. And we may not all know we need to be at the table, but we all need to be there. And for those that are gatekeepers and stakeholders, I just think it's imperative that we come together with clinicians, researchers, community folk, and do what's in the best interest of everybody.
I agree with you completely. How did you get your IRB on board for that?
That's a good question. And here's the thing, and I can't, Giselle knows more about the UNC IRB, but I do know about some other universities. Now we have community folks that own the IRB. It has become our responsibility to hold our community folks responsible.
That's right.
Our community folks that own these IRBs. And there needs to be, there's a learning curve that needs to have an IRB. IRBs are typically behind researchers, and they become your headache because they don't understand that if you promise to do it September the 10th, that the flyer that they were supposed to go out is not yet ready and all those kind of things. But we have to educate them. And how you educate that is you invite them to come to the community. Invite them. Be deliberate about setting up a session like this Saturday coming up, where I'm inviting people from the University of North Carolina and other places who deal with IRBs, and they're coming and going to be on site and seeing that we're going to have 200 or 300 people that are ready to do whatever it is that you want them to do, but you can't BS them. You can't fool them. Sometimes it's one shot, one kill. And so it's important that you make sure the IRB understand that we're in this thing together. How are you going to protect me if I ain't at the table? If the IRB's job is to protect me as a citizen, and if your system is in place to keep me from coming to the table, then that whole process needs to be looked at.
And so I can tell you that for any of these studies, because they tend to be a little complicated and a little outside the norm, is that we go and meet with the IRB. We sit down with them and say, this is what we're hoping to do. This is where our partners are. This is, how they're going to be involved. And so give us some advice on how we need to package this in a way that's acceptable to our partners and acceptable to sort of the ethical standards that we need to uphold as well. And they shouldn't be in conflict, right? I mean, they shouldn't be in conflict.
She said I can take one question, and I think that's the end right here.
Well, I think you might have answered my question because I'm here.
Well, you want somebody else wants
Well, you focused on community partnerships and academic partnerships. And it seems to me that the principles you're talking about should not just be coming when we're in these kinds of relationships. And so I don't want people to go away thinking, oh, I'm not in the community, I'm not doing research over here, without looking at the essence of what I think you're saying. And it's treating people with respect. It's listening to people. It's trying to look at our needs and how to best work together. So I just wanted to say thank you for what I hear is a bigger reflection.
Just remember, whatever you think happening for others will also happen for you. Remember that. It doesn't matter what station in life you find yourself. And I've been dirt poor. And trust me, I'm not poor than that. my rate is $20, $50 an hour. And I travel the country. But here's the real thing. Treat people just as she just said. Use whatever skill you have to be an access into the particular area that you're going to work. And if you do that, then every night you can lay down and do not good night. And that's what it was all about in the city today.
I don't really have anything to add. I think that your comment really sums it up. This is sort of what we all learned, what we all needed in life to learn in kindergarten. This is where we are. And it's a little ironic that we have to come and give this keynote, but sometimes, all of us need reminding of that. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.